Collections. Now, our next presenter, I don't think I really need to introduce him, but what the heck. Let me try and see if I can tell you something about Peter that you don't already know. Peter is currently the University Librarian at the University of Hong Kong. He is also the immediate past president of the Hong Kong Library Association. He is a member of the board of directors of CUHK, a not-for-profit joint venture, whose mission is to build a sustainable, geographically distributed dark archive to ensure the long-term survival of web-based scholarly publications. He is also a member he is the vice chair of the Asia Pacific Regional Council of OCLC and a board member of the Networked Digital Libraries of Theses and Dissertations, which promotes the adoption, creation, use, dissemination, and preservation of electronic theses and dissertation. And he can hold his liquor. Now, the last point is important because the topic of his presentation today is JURA. That is also the name of an excellent Scotch whiskey. Peter.
Okay, thanks Rachel. Let me first and foremost acknowledge my co-author. I think many people in this room know her, the very shy Linda Lee. Stand up, Linda. Take your punishment. Just a couple of things. First, I appreciate Lane's comment that JULAC has moved from competition to more cooperation. I think we're in a situation that I like to call co-opetition, which may be an English translation of Yin-Yang, I'm not sure. The other thing, one of the great things about Hong Kong society is that it is renowned for its can-do approach. Projects get decided upon, acted upon, implemented in a very short period of time. Unfortunately, some projects sit around for a while. Tamar site, West Kowloon Cultural Precinct, JURA, unfortunately. I am talking about JURA, and it is purely a print solution, or a print storage solution. I also need to acknowledge that my participation in this is just a little over 2 years, and JURA has been on the books, I can't begin to tell you, I think at least 8. And so there are several people in this room who have far deeper participation in this than I. Unfortunately, pretty much all of them have left Hong Kong. Figure out that on your own. We've heard a bit about Hong Kong higher ed and JULAC, but I'm going to indulge because I am the first full Hong Kong speaker. So the point I'd like to raise about Hong Kong higher education is, well, there are a number of things there, but the one I really like to point out is that this academic year, which is really just concluded, we moved from a 3-year to a 4-year program. Essentially that means we have an additional intake. So we have 2 curricula running at the same time, a 3-year curricula and a 4-year curricula. At the end of the day, it means that we have 1/3 extra bodies in our campuses. And why is that important? Well, you can imagine the impact of that on our libraries. But it has also had an impact on the creation of JURA, and we'll come to that in a moment. The other point is this desire for deep collaboration, and it's been mentioned by Louise in her introduction yesterday that the libraries of Hong Kong have been recognised by the government for their contribution to deep collaboration in higher education, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment as well. So here is the dot, the blown up dot, as Diane eloquently put it yesterday. So it's not quite a dot, 1,100 square kilometres, and that's the distribution of the 8 institutions. So yes, we are close. Geography is an important factor, and I will come back to that in a moment, particularly in the context of where JURA is proposed to be located. Now, indulge me even further, I'll tell you a little bit about Hong Kong U. Okay, the point I think to note is that we were founded in 1911, so we have a long history of collecting. So to give you, well, look at some pretty pictures. A mixture of styles, colonial, Chinese, modernist and brutalist as well. Like most of you, your collections have now grown, digital collections have now grown to the point that they exceed your print collections. So really quite rapidly, our digital collections have exceeded our 100 years of collecting print in quite a dramatic fashion. And the impact of that is of course significant. The use of print is on the decline. That's, I think you can say that is universal. Perhaps in Hong Kong it's been delayed for a little bit. You can see 2006-07 it was quite flat, and I should have shown you the previous years because it was actually on the rise prior to those years. But you can see now there's a steady decline of about 10% each year. At Hong Kong U we have had a print repository, which is a remote storage facility, for I think around 14 or 15 years. So we have had some experience of singular storage of our print. Just to give you an insight into the usage of that facility, we have tried to emphasize or centralize our journals predominantly in that print repository because of its remoteness and the need for not entire sets of print journals, but usually just an article. So these are the number of articles that have been delivered from the storage facility, which is actually not that far away, only a few kilometres away. And you can see it's on the decline. Over 9 years, down about 70%. On the other hand, in the terms of the books that we have stored there, it has risen by about 150% over those 9 years. And I guess the reason behind that is that over the past 9 years we have transferred almost 250,000 volumes progressively. But you can see where we have become quite serious in moving those books, 2010, 11 and 12. That storage facility is full. If I should have brought some photographs to show you the state of our physical premises and the stacks, which are in a fairly desperate state. So I think probably of the 8 institutions, we are most desperate to have JURA constructed. Let me tell you a little bit more about JULAC, and I think Hai-Peng covered this quite eloquently yesterday. Yes, we're a forum to discuss, coordinate and collaborate on resources and services. We have 8 institutions, as you know, but we also have affiliate members who join us, particularly in joint purchasing and licensing agreements. Now, here are some points about JULAC that you can see as advantages or disadvantages. The third point is interesting, and it's actually inaccurate. It should be 7 out of 8. So in recent years, 2 years, we have had 7 out of the 8 directors depart. Good thing? Bad thing? Co-opetition, right? So, but there are some obvious benefits there. I think one of the great things that we have is our manager, Linda, who keeps us in check and keeps us very well organised. All right, we are striving towards collaboration, and in fact deep collaboration, which is what the UGC calls it. And the 2 areas that are relevant to the repository experience is Hong Kong All, which was identified by the government as an area of deep collaboration, and JURA. Just before I go on, this is the total circulation statistics for all the JULAC libraries combined. And you can see, as I was saying earlier, there's that kind of rise and then the plateau, and now it is on the decline. But the point that I make about the increase in books being delivered from the Hong Kong U storage demonstrates that there is still a need for those items. And so that gives me evidence to demonstrate that there is a continuing need to store these volumes and that JURA is the proper solution for that. I mentioned Hong Kong All. What is it? Well, most of you know, but for those of you who don't, it's a user-initiated, unmediated, interlibrary loan service among the 8 JULAC libraries. It is the usage of InReach, Innovative's InReach module. It's the first of its kind in Asia, a first to include a large number of Chinese items. In many senses, it is perhaps a virtual distributed shared storage, or has the potential, because the Union catalogue shows us what we hold, the number of duplicates that we hold, how easily we can get those from other institutions. Just something that I think is worth pointing out. This is the figures that Innovative have given us, and it shows the monograph, only the monograph overlap, because that's what InReach or Innovative, sorry, Hong Kong All deals with. We have 8.8 million monograph titles across the 8 institutions, 11.45 million volumes. 73% are unique. Now that's exceptionally high, exceptionally high. Now I know many people in this room question that figure, and the Chinese bibliographers and cataloguers, I think, mostly, because there is some discussion that the inaccuracy lies in the inability to deduplicate Chinese monographs. But nonetheless, that is the figure that we work with at the moment. So Hong Kong All, just to show the impact that it had on the sharing of books among the 8 institutions, we introduced it in 2005 in an experimental phase with just 3 institutions participating. And then in 2006, I think it was 2006, everybody joined in, funded by the government because of the fact that it was seen as a proper area of deep collaboration. And you can see that it's peaked in 2009-10, and now, like other print usage in Hong Kong U and JULAC across the board, the print is pretty rapidly declining. Once again, that's just a different figure. We also have figures that show the borrowing by each of the institutions, and you can see who here is a heavy borrower and who is a light borrower. And similarly, we have figures for lending and who is a heavy lender and so on. This, of course, can be manipulated through load balancing so that we can get a more equitable distribution of who is doing the lending. One thing that I should point out is that our usage of Hong Kong All has been really quite significant and dramatic, the way we share print. These figures are actually taken from 2009-10. They were shared with us by Innovative, and they show that per library, Hong Kong is the busiest InReach implementation in the world. So just outdoing Prospector and really outdoing OhioLink, but there's a large number of libraries in OhioLink. Okay, so why is all that important? All that's important because it set a new standard, I think, for collaboration among the 8 institutions, and it's probably reflective of Lane's comment as well. It's also created this expectation among our users and our stakeholders, but I think for the context of today, it's an example or a basis for our future collaborative efforts, and in particular, joint storage. So here is the quote from the UGC's report of 2010, and you can see they were frankly disappointed at the level of collaboration, etc., except for the collaboration by libraries on a new joint storage facility and the sharing of books. So that's JURA, yet to be realised, and Hong Kong All, very successful. So, talking about joint storage, I think Lane would be very familiar with this. And probably knows Daniel Greenstein very well, and that this was quite a controversial item. However, the quote or the part in bold is not that controversial, and I think it's kind of passé for that time. That was, I think, 2009. I mean, begin to collaborate. I mean, I think libraries had already been collaborating to that extent quite significantly. So what are the benefits of collaborative storage? Well, obviously there are financial benefits, what I call efficacy, which is the ability to achieve the desired outcome is probably more readily possible with a larger number, a critical mass number. And what I call spirituality, which is what I think librarians have inherently, the ability or the desire to work together and to achieve. But you can see the other reasons, the benefits. There are building costs obviously going to be reduced, rationalisation of the collection, there will be less to manage, staffing, there will be less staffing necessary. Obviously the space would be less, opportunities for centralised preservation, interlibrary loan, document delivery, and so on. Now here I'm going to share with you an image of what I think is perhaps a repercussion of non-collaborative storage facility. Moving along quickly. It's not all plain sailing, of course, so there are issues that arise, there are tensions, there are decisions that need to be made. So the facility and the collection, are they shared, are they managed? Who has the ownership? What are the access issues? How are the costs going to be decided upon? What about the ongoing costs, apart from the initial costs? What are the logistics in terms of delivering materials to the 8 libraries? What is the management structure within the facility, and what's the overall governance? Don't really need to share this with you except for the, I guess, the bold part, but library consortial activities, yes, embody and reveal several irresolvable tensions. Yesterday, Joseph from the Philippines he gave us a quote of obstacles to collaboration, and I mentioned in my question to him that I attended a conference in 2004, and I thought this was a very, very interesting quote, and Joseph's list of obstacles almost, copy these directly, and this is actually quite depressing reading if you read through it, but it does provide pretty much a shopping list of the reasons that we may not be able to collaborate. Now let me say that this pervasive lack of tradition of cooperation does not exist among JULAC, but of course we still face the competitive nature that creates that tension. So let's talk a bit more about JURA. What is its purpose? Fairly straightforward. As an efficient, sustainable, secure, climate-controlled storage and retrieval facility for research materials, promotes shared access, scholarly information, and facilitates the effective use of space within existing library buildings. The overall goal? Fast and cost-effective access to lesser used but still important research materials. The model that has been derived is one of joint ownership. Deduplicated material, that is single copy, no duplication within the facility. The management would be by, or in fact the governance really, by a new body that would be represented by the stakeholders, being the 8 institutions. So the governance, more specifically, it is jointly owned by the 8 JULAC libraries. We have now been incorporated as a company which is called the JULAC Joint Universities Research Archive Limited, company limited by guarantee and recognised by the government as a charitable organisation for taxation purposes. And we have a board of directors being the 8 JULAC librarians. I'll just share something with you which is, from my mind, amusing, but the incorporation process was dictated by the UGC because they wanted to deal with a single body and not 8 separate institutions, which makes perfect sense. But we had a legal firm with us to help us with the incorporation process. Now, they quoted us a figure to do the incorporation process based on what they thought would take about a 3-month period. Librarians, they're all nice and they get along and so on. It actually went for close to 20 months, and the cost blew out for them by about 4 to 5 times their quoted estimate. However, they held true with their original estimate. But it shows the complexity of the 8 institutions. The shared costs, the formula, yet to be fully devised, will be based upon these 3 components. There will be an entry fee which would be equal among the 8 institutions. The second factor would be determined by the relative size of the institution, and in particular I think the block grant from the government, the UGC. And the third is the relative number of items that each institution would place into the repository. The capacity, you can see here, the difference being that there is inbuilt capacity to expand the facility upon being full. Okay, the design. Now really, this is where I have entered into this whole procedure, is in the detailed design, in fact. The base design was determined well before I was involved in the project, but the detailed design is evident here. I think showing you is more important than telling you, and I know we're running out of time, I think. It will be a high-density ASRS, automated storage and retrieval service. Items will be stored according to height and in metal bins, each bin, as you can see, holding about 750 pounds. Each story will have 4 aisles, each with a robotic crane, about 35 to 40 tiers high. It will, in effect, be a 12-storey building. You can see the structure here. Each one floor or one story is equivalent to 3 regular floors, so incredibly high, each of those floors. Here's an aerial shot of it, and next up I'm going to show you the architectural drawings. Now the architect is quite sensitive, as most architects are, because this is a fairly controversial building, but he tells us it is meant to be sympathetic to the natural environment of the region. When we took this to the District Lands Council to beg for the land, they were concerned, to put it mildly. Many members of the project committee are concerned, describing it as a battleship. I prefer to be more sympathetic and call it an ant farm. But as our architect says, many people criticised the pyramid outside the Louvre. As one of our professors said, honey, that ain't the Louvre, I tell you. But anyway, this is what we have. And you can see it's green, it has green elements, and we do believe it will be eligible for LEED Gold status. So make of it what you will. Its location. All right, so coming back to geography, this is where it is proposed to be. And you can see it is geographically centre to us. Now, had we put it on Hong Kong Island, who is on Hong Kong Island, right? We just wouldn't get away with it, particularly as Hong Kong U is the lead institution. And there's no space on Hong Kong Island anyway. Okay, so the current status is this. There were 3 requirements by the UGC before they would give us the funding for the go-ahead. And here we are. 1, the detailed design. Well, we have that, and it has been approved. 2, the incorporation, that is the 8 institutions forming a company. Done that. 3, land is allocated. Land has been allocated in principle. They will not turn the land over until they see that the money is in our account. So we're in a kind of catch-22 with that one. And the final hurdle, having done all that, is that the government will use its discretion at the Capital Works Resource Allocation Exercise. Now that's an acronym for you, CWRAE, where they decide on major infrastructure projects and the funding for those. Problem is they only do that once a year, which is in October. So if you don't get it that year, you've got to wait another year. So essentially for 2 years we've been sitting in abeyance, just sitting on our fingers, basically doing very little, fine-tuning and talking amongst ourselves about governance issues and so on. But really we just have to wait. And if in October this year it doesn't get up, it's a problem, I think, certainly for Hong Kong U. So let me say emphatically, is it going to get up? I have no idea. I've been told, though, by an insider that it is right at the top of the list. Now, I come back to the 4-year curriculum and the intake of students, and that has been the major contributing factor as to why JURA has not been given the go-ahead and the funding by the government, because the government has spent an enormous amount of funding on infrastructure in the universities to improve the facilities, expand the facilities to cater for those students. So it is far more important to have students catered for on campus than storing books somewhere remotely. Are there obstacles? Yes, and I know my time is almost up, but I'll very briefly go through these. The metrics, and this is more simple than Lane's metrics. It's really, do we count those as our own? We still, you saw my fears about our print volumes. We still cherish those in Hong Kong. It is still a metric that we use. The funding is still an issue, and it's not so much the seed funding, but the continued funding of the installation. The physical access, I mentioned this earlier. The geography, I think the geography is in hand. It's very central. The faculty reactions is one that I'm not sure about your institutions, but I know that ours, we've been talking about this for so long. Faculty are seeing our shelves in a terrible state. So I think the faculty reactions will be quite positive at Hong Kong U. Do we have the continuing institutional commitment given the delays and so on, and the other usual collaboration issues? But I see JURA as the dawn of a new era, if it comes ahead. Why is that? I see it because it's going to create what I call this greater spirituality among us. And I'm not going to tell you why, because this afternoon Brian from Baptist and Patty and Maria from Chinese U are going to talk about some areas of deeper collaboration. But I think that JURA is going to be a catalyst for change, and I'm just going to quickly show you this, that it's going to give impetus and motivation for those 2 areas that they're going to talk about to actually occur. So I thank you for your time, and I hope that you will wish us luck.